G'day, Gerard. How are you?
I'm good. What about all of that?
Yeah, it was awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I think one thing you want out of, I suppose, if you're a supporter that goes and watches your teams, you want to see them play at their best. You want to see them grow. You want to see them win. You want that feeling when you leave to the satisfaction of winning. But if you don't get that, you want to see a great contest and that your team's had a crack and an opportunity to win. And I reckon, for the most part, that's what we saw on the weekend. It was compelling viewing. There wasn't a lot of switching off that would have gone on, I think, from the lounge room. And even if it wasn't your side playing, there was plenty of contests worth watching to the end.
All right, so let's get into it. The buck stops for Victoria Police made for more search police careers.
Well, I think the fact that there were so many close games highlights the fact that you need players or a system or the ability to be able to get the job done when it matters. So you had a caller earlier talking about mastering the moment, and that's exactly what you need to do. We do forget about what happens at the 10-minute mark of the first quarter, maybe a set shot that was missed or a poster that was hit or a tackle that wasn't laid. But it doesn't matter. When you get to the last 5 minutes and you're within a goal, well, then the team tactics are important. So the knowledge of what that strategy looks like is crucial. We saw it with Jack Crisp on the wing against Geelong last week. He goes down to match Jeremy Cameron, ends up taking that mark, misses the set shot on goal, which is the next thing you need to get right. You need to take your opportunities. So getting the strategies right is crucial. Being able to finish. So we saw with Blitzavs hitting the posts, and I suppose bad kicking from set shots for Geelong throughout the day concerned them. But then we get key contests. Mark Keane going back with a flight, taking that mark. It's just, if he'd have done that 10 minutes into the second quarter, you would have thought, that's awesome. But when you know the game is on the line and Port Adelaide are coming, that was an amazing act and executing in the moment. Bailey Humphrey centre bounce win after the Dogs got within 3 points. A young fella who was trusted to go into the middle, had a one-on-one that he was probably 50-50 of winning and was able to guts himself to be able to get his hands on the ball and then get it forward. And then, of course, the Tom Brown, sort of the desperate tackle that came. And you need a little bit of luck as well. I thought Essendon got that free kick to Nick Martin, sort of just in front of Sydney's goal. They were coming a little bit. So, yes, there's a bit of luck, but then key contests, being able to finish and knowing exactly what the team is asking of you in the moment.
It would be interesting to be in some of the reviews of the 2-minute drills, given that we know clubs do 2 minutes hanging on and 2 minutes to win it. What they looked like is, so Sydney just gave themselves so many chances, so many chances. It was breathtaking. Port Adelaide, for that long period of time where they couldn't come up with a goal, they were just relentlessly attacking, but without any real system to it. Geelong clearly had their chances. Manor kicks the ball out on the full, kicks it behind, Blitzavs misses. So Chris Scott spoke around. It seemed like they had the process right, but they couldn't hit the execution at the end. And then in the Tassie game, Comben twice stands and take big marks. Nice. Payne with the spoil when North are surely going to the goal mouth.
And a little bit is taken from that with Constanti kicking instead of handballing to Dylan Stevens. Now, just to pump the brakes on that a little bit, Stevens was running across Constanti onto his non-preferred foot. Now, that might have got you an extra 10 or 15, but it would have got a player on a non-preferred. I would have preferred for Stevens to have actually tried to run parallel a little bit, or even have we heard there's a thing called a block or a shepherd? You can actually take your opposition and give the player with the ball an extra 5 or 10 metres. But all of those little things, they're either coached or they're not coached, they're executed or not executed, and they make all the difference in the end.
The buck stops. Looking for a career that gives you more, search police careers, Victoria Police made for more. Did that evolve over your playing and coaching days? When you were playing early, what were the drills winning and saving games a thing, or did they evolve?
What fascinates me with that is the fact that it's a 2-minute drill. So what makes it 2 minutes?
Yeah.
And philosophically, I always had an issue with dropping a player in behind the ball, because I think what it does is it gives the opposition an extra runner on their half-back line more often than not. And fuels the momentum that they may or may not have at that time. So whether it's whether it's sort of in the middle of a quarter where you're trying to hold up against a side that seems to have field position, or whether it's late in a game, I was always loath to do it too early. Like, it's definitely like when you've decided you're not going to score anymore and you just need to hold up, then it's great to have an extra. But then when you want the extra, the coaching now is you just equalise. So what you're doing is you're basically committing to play the game in your back half for a period of time. That's why it's not called a 4-minute drill, because you don't want to do that for 4 minutes. And it's why. But teams will go into like a win the game or a green to speed it up, to change directions. And we'll get to St Kilda and Carlton later in the means test. But they'll go to green often before a team is willing to put its cue in the rack and just hold up. So that little period there, which might be between, 5 minutes and 3 minutes, might be between 10 minutes and 3 minutes, then that becomes a fascinating aspect of the game as well. But it wasn't coached as heavily outside of just going back to basics. Lockdown was probably the one. Just don't give them any free player anywhere if you're trying to hold the game up, which is very similar to what we saw in the third quarter of the Saints-Carlton game.
All right, the art of the close finish. The big issue, Giants win their 5th straight at GMHBA and avoid losing 4 in a row. What a game this was.
It was a fascinating game. And once again, the Giants have given up 61 inside 50s by the end of it. So their first quarter is the prototype for the Giants to go forward, because there are still massive alarm bells for me with they played better, and obviously to win a game at the enemy at the enemy's home ground, but Giants have obviously got a great mental and emotional belief when they go there, and then they've rolled out and got the job done again. So the win itself was excellent. You can't. I mean, they'd be cock a hoot about that. They'd be so wrapped about that win, but there's still some red flags for me. They gave Geelong 18, 15 and 18 inside 50s for the last 3 quarters after holding them to 10 inside 50s in the first quarter. Jesse Hogan was huge. Tom Green was massive. They without 2 of their premier sort of high forwards in Daniels and Jones. So that was a meritorious win, but it was done with some of their best football early, and then they just were able to hold on late.
Jesse Hogan's 7 goals, sort of in 2 different modes. Some of the contested work through the early phase, and then the space that he got in the back half of it all.
Well, they were able to move the ball. The tsunami was definitely there. They scored 9 goals from their back half, so that was that game. That part of their game was definitely on show, and that was back. And I thought his coach was pretty apt. Some of the marks that Hogan took under fierce pressure, he would clearly be the best contested marking player in the game. I think he definitely has been at the pointy end of the last couple of seasons. When the Giants have got into contention, through August, September, he's been the best key forward because he can win the ball hitting up on a lead. He can float across and take and win a one-on-one contest and work his player out away from the ball and then go to highest point. But the other thing that he does, and this is the third part of it, he actually can stand in the middle of a pack, find a foot and a half of space, and then just go to where the ball is. So there's 3 different ways that he is able to mark, and he's obviously got some ground level attributes as well. So could have kicked more than 7. He was probably that was the least he was going to get on the day because he was absolutely on.
And the Geelong side of things, so they've played this sequence of high-quality games. They've played in the most watchable games of the year, I think. They beat Adelaide, they beat Hawthorn, they lose to Carlton, they beat Collingwood, and they lose to the Giants on their home deck.
Yeah, they've beaten some good opposition, and they've probably lowered their colours or had 2 performances where they weren't quite at their optimum. It was interesting, Chris Scott's comments after the game when he spoke about throwing, because I think he's an aggressive coach. He's prepared to, if it's not break it. Like, he wants to find better. He wants to find different. But he admitted after the game that he thought that, starting Bailey Smith on the wing, starting Cameron in the middle, unsettled his team. They went down in clearances early, which gave the Giants a bit of fuel to be able to drive their first quarter dominance. And I think ultimately that did tell. It's interesting when you do that. Like, you've got an opposition that's coming down that know they have a little bit of belief in it. Like, you want to squash that real early at your home ground. So the first 10 or 15 is really important. So it's interesting that self-reflection and he put it on himself, Chris Scott. So that threw the cats around a little bit. But geez, they found a way late, and I think their best football is excellent. They're still playing a lot of young blokes. And I think that you're right. Their football is compelling. They can play that high transition game. They can get their hands dirty in the trenches. I didn't think they lost any admirers. I think they'll be kicking themselves. But yeah, I don't think they lost any admirers, and I think that they're a fascinating watch.
Well, they conceded 5 of the first 6 goals.
Yeah, and field position a little bit, but I think that. We don't want to not give the Giants credit here, because I thought they came with great energy. Stringer was up and about early before going out. They were able to move the ball really efficiently and really, really slick, the way that we've seen them do it at their best. So that returned. And they actually had really high pressure on Geelong around the midfield, which created turnovers for them to be able to go back. And it protected their back six from having to do as much work as they did in the last 3 quarters, and also what they have done throughout the year. So every team's got its warts, every team's got its areas of weakness. But when you get 2 quality teams, I think they're 2 top 4 teams. I mean, the Giants weren't in my seedings last week, or if they haven't been there for the last couple of weeks. We'll have a look if they get back in. But Geelong, I think, are definitely up and about.
We got this great text. If Geelong finish 5th at the end of the season and the GWS finish 8th, did Geelong still request the final is played at GMHBA? That's beautiful Monday morning thinking, that is.
Well, you can. Why would you? No, Geelong want to go to the G, don't they?
What a quirk. So really, Collingwood at Adelaide Oval and the Giants at GMHBA. 2 teams that have conquered somebody else's fortress over a long period of time.
I think what it speaks to is the power of belief. What it speaks to is that your past experiences do carry on if you wish, if you have a positive mindset and belief, and if you've demonstrated something in a venue with that group against that other group, well, then that is likely to continue until something changes. So Geelong missed a trick there. I think they missed a trick in that first 10 or 15 years. The part of it might have been, what are we going to disrupt here against our opposition that feels like they're comfortable coming to us?
Yep.
That's so it'll be an interesting watch next time.
The best bit, Bucks, by far.
Hegger was the interview afterwards, as good as the tackle itself. If I didn't get that, I was going to get smoked in review. It was awesome, and he's been a young player that's been coming along for quite a while, and you sort of maybe to other supporters of other clubs, sort of if you're in the bottom sort of reaches of the ladder, the young talent there can be missed at times unless they're number 1 picks, and unless they're usually getting their asses kicked for maybe not performing to the level that we expect. But he's quietly gone about his business. He's in a back six that's relatively experienced. Vlosten and Broad are floating around. Obviously, Bolter. There's a lot of experience in that back six. So you got Brown and Trainer that are coming up through there. But that effort in itself was exceptional. Had to run down the guy that had started as the sub and had the freshest legs on the field. And as he said, like he came out hard to go and hit that spoil to try and cut that kick off. And I think that's the right decision. That's the right play until you don't make the play. And then you're thinking, this is now they're an extra number in front or behind me, and I've got to make up for this. And he did. He dug in, he put his head down, he was able to stick the tackle. That game itself was, was on a knife edge the whole time. Richmond had its moments. First and last quarters had field position. West Coast, dominated field position through the middle of the game. So it was, both teams. There was merit in both teams, and it was going to come down to moments.
To execute the rundown tackle, which it was just so perfect that a game would be decided by one of those, given what we've lived through in recent times. So if you're overly enthusiastic, you end up as Paul Curtis. If you get it wrong ever so slightly in the margins, although I'll never be convinced, you end up with Bobby Hill's scenario. So you had to nail the rundown tackle as well to not give away the free kick and to end up with it. So as an execution of skill, he got it spot on.
Is there a cynic in you at all? Like if he was knocked out, Gross?
Yeah, but the point was he executed the tackle perfectly. So that puts him ahead of Curtis and Hill, who didn't.
Right. Okay.
So Curtis pushed in the back. So take the concussion out.
Yeah.
Curtis pushed in the back. Illegal tackle.
Yep.
Free kick
against, yes.
Hill's adjudged to have gone low. I don't believe that, but there are those who say that's what happened. Illegal tackle. Perfectly legal tackle to win the ball. That's skill.
In as desperate a situation as you're ever going to find.
That's right. Just outstanding to be able to do that.
Yeah, it was excellent. And these are the risks that you have to take. Like he was prepared to lunge. He was prepared to drive the player into the ground, had to drive the player into the ground with his body weight. If Gross had knocked himself out, it would have been a really interesting discussion. But Brown did exactly what he was asked to do in the manner that he was asked to do it. And to be able to execute in that moment was first class. But I think that it's a perfect tackle because the outcome was perfect. If the outcome, even if he couldn't control it, was not perfect, well then we wouldn't be sitting here saying it's a perfect tackle. There'd be something to answer for. So I'm a little more cynical in that regard, but for what the young kid did and what he was able to do, great job.
Spot check on Richmond, 3 wins through 9. Pretty good.
Yeah, I've been impressed with the way that they've gone about it. They've had a few halves of games where they've been well beaten, and they just haven't had when their intensity drops off a little bit. But it's been up there. It's been relatively high. I think their effort, their endeavour. I think their senior players, externally looking at them, their senior players are playing with energy. And I think that that's so important for the younger players to come up. I think they're joined together really well. It's obvious that they're trying to play a high pressure game. They're prepared to be expansive with the ball. They look dangerous when they get in the front half with their small forwards. I do like the way they've gone about it, and it's all credit to them. Well, they're getting a lot right. I mean, we'll get to Sydney in a moment because their fits and starts, their best looks really good, but then they'll go dormant for a period of time, and they're trying to handle a loss of personnel at the moment, especially in the front half. But what Essendon do deserve is that they've copped an absolute caning for their inability to defend the ground and their I suppose the opposition getting high inside 50s and scoring heavily against them, mainly on turnover, but that's been the knock on Essendon for a long time. And the media have gone to sleep with, and there's a writer on this because they haven't played high-scoring sides in the last 6 rounds, but they've been 5-1 since allowing 161 points against Adelaide at the MCG, and there were plenty of questions being asked after round 2. They've held their opposition, like the scores against have been low. Only Collingwood have had less scores kicked against them in that 6-week period. They're 5-1 like Collingwood. But they're 8 points behind Collingwood in terms of their defensive effectiveness, total aggregate. But if you dig a little bit deeper with that, they're defending turnover second best in that 6-week period, and only Collingwood is better. Essendon haven't had a profile like this at any stage in Brad Scott's tenure, and if you go back even further, it's always been the knock on Essendon. Yes, they're prepared to move the ball, shift the ball, they want to score, but they can't stop the opposition coming back the other way. Scores from clearance, they are the best in that 6-week period. They've only allowed just shy of 23 points, which is a goal better than the next team, which is Geelong. Then we've got Hawthorn. Then you've got Collingwood. So they're up there with some really good, well-structured, experienced teams that are doing it in defence as well. So that's turnover and that's stoppage. They're second for scores from inside 50 against, so their percentage of defending their back 50 well for their entries, they're second. Collingwood are 1. They're second for goals. Giants are 1 in that 6-week period. They're third best at preventing a side from going end to end in an undefended chain. So that is a type of defence that we've been questioning them on for a long time. So they're actually getting it done now. The 6 of the 8 teams that they've played are in the bottom 8 from scoring, including Collingwood, funnily enough. In the bottom 8 of scoring, they play the Bulldogs, who are the best scoring team in the last 6 weeks. And then 2 weeks after that, they play Brisbane. So now we find out, okay, is it because of the teams you've played? Is it because they haven't been able to score heavily or get their act together on the offensive side? Or what is it that you are doing and the systems that you're going, is it going to stack up against the best offensive side? So we get a real close look at that straight away against the Bulldogs this weekend.
And in amongst that, the rise of Zach Reid, so the player who had for so long been denied a fair run at his career, is getting that now, and we can see what was always promised.
Yeah,
I suppose.
and so there was the game against Port Adelaide in round 3. Georgiades went bang bang, and Mackay was on him, and the call was made really quickly. It was before quarter time. Said, no, Zach Reid, you now have to go and knock out their best scoring threat and take it and bring it into an element of control. And he did exactly that. You know, he played on Georgiades. There was a baptism of fire because Port Adelaide were up and about early in that game. Georgiades had kicked a couple, but he quelled him. And then from that point on, he basically didn't have a goal kicked against him until recently. He's been intercept marking. He's been using the ball really well. Heard Kingy talking about it last night. He's talking about a player who settles players around him, and that's exactly what he's predictable. He's reliable. He's dependable, and he doesn't look shaky at all. He looks like he's in control. He doesn't win every contest, but he looks like he's in control. And if he loses a contest, well, then he's not beaten in the next one. So I think his growth has been excellent for them, and they have actually built their system, their back half system, around this kid who's been lightly schooled, lightly played, but has come ahead in leaps and bounds. I mean, they've still had to withstand Ridley sort of being there, but he actually looks like a Ridley who's 6 inches taller in the way that he goes about, Ridley at his best in the way that he goes about his footy. So the Bombers fans will be hoping that Ridley gets back and that he gets healthy and that they can sort of keep working to cobble this sort of best back 6 or 7 together, because they're putting a few being able to lock a few magnets away in the last 6-7 weeks. It's a really interesting fork in the road that Sydney come to, because we can see and they can feel and see that they're not quite performing at their best. They've had elements of it. I defended them through the first sort of 4 or 5 weeks, but a performance like that shows exactly what they need to improve, and the discussion that would have been taking place with the coaches, and in that immediate, if there's clips there that they're looking at an immediate review, they'll go one or two ways, because their deficiencies have never been clearer to them, and that is we were ill-disciplined in the first half. We shot ourselves in the foot, and the opposition came back, and that with greater energy and greater dare, they were able to put a winning score on the board before half-time. And yeah, we came back, but we lost the game that they should be walking in there thinking, we lost the game, we should have won. So what do you do with that feeling? Because you've only got yourself to blame. So they go, in the next month, they've got winnable games. They play Carlton, who are going to make it a dour game, and it's going to be a slog in some shape or form, but that's at home. they need to pick themselves up and go. They should win that game, regardless of where Carlton are at, where Sydney are at. I think Sydney's at what Sydney have shown at their best. They should win that game, and the fact they beat the Giants there 2 weeks ago. Then they play Melbourne at the MCG, and I think that could well be another dour game. But that's something that they should win. Adelaide Crows back at the SCG, not dissimilar to the Giants. I think it'd be interesting whether they can start favourites by that. It's 3 weeks away, and then they've got the Tigers. So Sydney have still got, and before their bye, they've got 4 what I would deem as winnable games in front of them, and they need to take these chances now, because if they don't do that, then they could fracture, and so okay, then their ill discipline or their lack of executing their skill or the role that's being asked of them at the time, the inefficiencies that we're seeing in their game, that could take hold and that could ruin their season. We've already seen an element of it, but it could get a lot worse if they don't fix it now.
Because of the nature of what they're doing, and the ill discipline's an interesting part of it, is they have opened themselves up to the conversation. Well, is this the toll of getting whacked in grand finals 2 of the past 3 and living the life of the runner-up? It's different. Just the manner. So they were right up for what happened in the hometown derby, right up for it.
Yep.
And they were not right up for it in the same way in this game, visibly. And then at the end, the levels of just mistake making were weird. So it's always intangible until you've got the full body of work and then the evidence. But they have left themselves open to that conversation, either unspoken or now externally spoken.
Well, the real problem for them is mechanically they've been trying to fix their front half, whether it's been from lack of personnel or availability or whether it's form. They've been trying to fix their back half since pre-season. So McCartan going forward was a response to that. We need more from our tall forwards. They need to be more competitive and more consistent for us. And Amadi's been in and out. McLean's been a little inconsistent. So you end up, Laddams isn't the answer. So you end up sort of settling with Francis and Hamling. Now, and both of those players, they are journeymen. They have been inconsistent performers that can come in to fill a void here and there, but they haven't ever proven to. And Hamling did behind the ball, but not as a forward. They've never proven to be consistent role players in the roles that they've been asked to play now over a long period of time. So you're going to get what you're going to get with these guys for the interim. Maybe if they can just be a 6 or a 7 out of 10 every week, that'd be great. But Hamley's was excellent in the Giants, and he was exposed a little bit more against the Bombers because he's still learning the role, or he's still proving, can I be consistent in that role? So that's where the Swans are at, and that's why we see huge fluctuations in my mind. Huge fluctuations in what they can put forward.
Yep. So very identifiable and understandable. And
but you've got to find a way. You've got to find a way, and you've got to find a way to buffer your worst. You can't afford to be ill-disciplined. You can't afford to be shooting yourself in the foot and giving the opposition a head start the way they did. So you can fix those. They are things that you need to own. There's things you can't do anything about. There's things you can't fix. But there's enough there that they can fix to make their worst periods, like as I said, a 6 or a 7 out of 10 rather than dropping down to a 3 or 4, because that's what we're getting.
So they're 3 and 6 in the 4-week salvage mission. So we'll mark them by whether they can get themselves to 7 and 6 and back into contention.
And they have the capability, they have the attributes to be able to do that. Now it's the mental and emotional belief of, can we accept where we are and why? Can we have a look at what we can do about it, the things that are in our control? And then can we go out and do that this week when we play Carlton on the SCG? If you can do that, well then can we go and take that same package to Melbourne on the MCG the week after? Can we do it again? Then we get a test against Adelaide. So there is an element of building that needs to happen. And this is Dean Cox's challenge and the leaders that are there at the Sydney Swans. Can't do anything about last year's grand final, But we want to find out how good we can be now. Not projecting too far to September, but this next month. Like, who are we? What do we want to hang our hat on? And let's go do that.
The unanswerable question, Nathan Buckley, is if they play like this, will they start to win their games? They've got Richmond, Collingwood and West Coast in their next 3 other wins right around the corner for North.
Well, they may be, but I think that's secondary as much as winning is everything. What Alistair Clarkson has just described, and I'm looking at the numbers. They're the 7th best team at preventing goals for their inside 50s in the last 3 weeks, which is a huge improvement. And they're the 11th best team at preventing scores, but they're on the same line as Western Bulldogs and Sydney in that time. So that is definitely validation for what they have put in place. And I think it started with personnel. Logan Corse sat out for a couple of weeks. Corse come back in. Pink is a real competitor. Comben is a player who can defend but also can attack, and we saw that late in the game. If you can take intercept marks and open the game up the way that he did to give them a chance to go back in late in that game, that's the type of mix that you want. They've got Hardiman who's come in, and he's still proving whether he's up to the level, but he's having a real crack. But I think that they've clearly chosen and prioritised competitiveness and an ability just to, you're going to get beaten every now and then, but to have a never beaten attitude. So that's starting to take shape. Look, their performances have been full of merit. I think North Melbourne supporters would have enjoyed watching the last 3 weeks. They would have really enjoyed watching last night because it looked like they were the team that was more likely to win. Zerha probably should have got a push in the back for the tackle on Leicester late in the game after the scores were level. They'll be smarting a little bit, North, but geez, when you're running the reigning premier to that sort of result, regardless of what they've dished up at the other end, that's pretty positive.
Yep, that's a big turn since what happened on Good Friday. PFI is the way you're playing likely to stack up when it really matters in the penultimate weekend of the year. The Crows have lived in the shadow of Port Adelaide since 2018. They've split their showdowns, but those are games removed, but they have lived below them. It felt like Saturday night was proof positive that the Crows are now the number one team in South Australia again. It was a game they uncannily deliver these showdowns. Port looked like they were getting on top in the middle stages of that third quarter, then 6 of 7 goals, Rankin kicks 2 in a row, and then Port just incrementally, like painfully try to drag themselves back into it and then come with a late flurry. It was terrific viewing. Before the Crows come for their true litmus test, which is Collingwood at the MCG, do they have PFI, Nathan Buckley?
Well, I think they do, because I think they're playing, and I've liked the Crows for a while.
Yep.
They were the no-names for a while. A couple of years ago, they were the no-names when they missed out on the final series in 23. I think that was that the Ben Keys?
Yep.
That far back. So that's how long ago it is that they were playing football that was beating and challenging the best teams in the competition. For various reasons, whether it's personnel, bad luck at times, and their bad luck has been worn as a badge, not so much from the club, but probably their supporting group. They've just been cobbling together this mix that they have. They've thickened the soup. Peatling comes in, Cumming comes in, Neil Bullen comes in, and they have definitely made them better. They're harder and more consistent across the field than they've been before. They've still got that high transition game that can score, and they've developed a back six that is bloody hard to beat. Like, they can win the ball in the air and on the ground, and their intensity across a 4-quarter period is good. So Adelaide's very best football, in my estimation, would beat pretty much the best of anyone else. Like, they're not far away. Like, if every team in the competition played its absolute best. So I think Adelaide's best footy well and truly stacks up. What they haven't yet proven, and they still have to prove, is their ability to stand up against the best in a game that needs to be won. And regardless of good luck or fortune or which way the game goes, that they can guts it out and win one at the end. And I suppose the last 5 minutes of the showdown was a positive step and good validation for that.
So next Saturday's game is one of those step up or step back games. So there'll be a big part of the means test next week.
Well, it is. And I think when you get – so we spoke about the top 7 sides last week and we had the Giants at 8. Now, the Giants have just gone and beaten one of those, in my estimations, the 7 teams that are playing football that's hard to beat. Yeah, and they don't beat themselves. And I think Adelaide are one of those teams, and they happen to be playing a Collingwood team who are in that group that I think are playing, football that is that challenges your best, that actually finds the weak point of whatever game style they're playing against, and then probes and prods against that. So I think it'll be a fascinating contest.
It suited Michael Voss's purposes to have St Kilda clog the game up.
He's right.
Third quarter in particular.
He's absolutely right. And he obviously with the players that they'd lost and the situation that they were on the interchange bench, I think you had a caller in Snap Judgments who actually said, why didn't we open as a St Kilda perspective, why didn't we open the game up? Why didn't we get it out into the spaces and turn it into a chaos game? Well, that's not the way St Kilda have played. They do want to go from the inside to the outside to great structure. They maintain great defensive structure first and foremost, and their attacking stuff has been pretty good. But one thing Carlton did do well, whether it was at a contest, whether it was long down the line, they pressured really well. They stopped St Kilda from I'm going to be checking myself for the next 20 years on that one. Like from the inside to outside, they might have got a chain of 2 or 3 handballs, but the fourth one was pressured and turned over or put back into a contest. So that is Carlton's one wood. That is what they do particularly well. St Kilda, I don't think St Kilda fed into it. I thought Carlton imposed it really well, and they needed to, because if it did get open, they may have been exposed with their interchange scenario, but they were able to lock the Saints down for large chunks of that game, and they just couldn't even get out. Even when it looked like they were going to get out, they couldn't get out. So that's what Carlton do as well as anyone when they're playing their best.
The debate, I reckon this is an old one of yours, is Darwin the best home ground advantage in footy? That's 7 in a row now for the Suns. The misnomer about these games is that the conditions make them unattractive. They're brilliantly attractive and skillful, the games that are there, and they have been high scoring for years on end now.
Well, I think teams start going out there now and they realise they're playing a wet weather game. It's raining. It doesn't matter if it's raining or not raining, it's still raining because the precipitation, the humidity is there, and sometimes they can be like the conditions can be really tough. It didn't look like it was overtly sort of over the top hot or over the top humid on the weekend. It still would have been, but not to the point where you're having to sort of increase the brakes, etc. But I think the Gold Coast have been able to. So that's 3.5 years now. So 2 games year on year, and there's another one obviously coming up against Hawthorn this week. And they have been able to win 7 games in a row. The Dogs are the team that actually got closest to it. Of those 7 games, 4 of them have been 10-goal-plus wins. The Dogs are the ones that have got closest to them, and they have been able to – I think they lost by 7 points last time. So this was they've been able to handle and adjust to the conditions, and they've been coached and executed well enough to be able to do that. But, yeah, the Suns were It's definitely it's no doubt an advantage for them. I think they love these fixtures. The players would look forward to it. It's a little what I've always thought. It's like going back to Geelong going back to GMHBA if they haven't had great form for anyone but the Giants. That is when they play them. But there is certain places and times in a schedule that works for you, and I think the Suns are making the most of this one. They're hard to beat. The Hawks will. Have to be up and ready to put a dent in the Suns this weekend.
They're averaging 116.5 points in their 7 wins on the trot. So, yeah, terrific the way that they've been able to mine that. Where should we go? Should we have Buckley's chance? What do you think of Clayton Oliver as a tagger?
Why not? Why not is what I think. I think at various times, especially if you have been tagged, I think it's a really good freshen up for an individual. Potentially, it could have happened a lot earlier. When he went back to halfback late last year, I thought that would have been a good opportunity just to see if you can turn what was a negative into a positive. But I think it's age old. It's been done plenty of times before, and I think that it's a great way of getting a player with elite talent. You know he's got great talent. You know he's got great ball winning ability. If you've had to chase the ball and get chased by a tagger for a large period of time, it actually gives you a bit of an emotional release as well, a mental release. And because all of a sudden you're the hunter rather than being the hunted. And that is a massive shift in your mentality going into a contest. So I think, I didn't mind it. And I wouldn't mind it continuing either, because you need to keep finding different ways of having your players influence for you, different things you could go to at different times. And right now, I think Melbourne are still in exploration mode to find out how they can get the best out of this new idea of how they're going to move the ball and how that's going to stack up for them throughout the year.
Yeah, so you do it for a few weeks on end, not just once?
Yeah, well, I think you end up taking the effectiveness of it. If he's asked to do it and the direct opponent gets 20 touches in a half, you might think, well, or he doesn't apply himself to it, or he's just not. It doesn't seem like the purpose is strong enough for a player to be able to do it, or he's not bought into it. Well, then it's folly to continue sort of trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. But if a player is open-minded and wants to test himself, wants to beat a pretty good opposition, a player in the opposition side, and he's got the willingness of tipping into team, yeah, I would. Righto, I've got the machete out.
Oh, well.
I've lopped the bottom half of my settings away. So Geelong and the Dogs, you just can't lose a game in my world at the moment.
I love it.
I've taken them out. So Geelong and the Dogs are out for the period. The sides that have come in, I've put the Suns at 4, and I just think that they're going well enough, and their game stacks up. Now they've got a really good test against the 3rd seed in Hawthorn.
So well done.
And so I haven't got a play-in game. I've got a play-out game.
Yeah.
Whoever loses, that's going out. So when the Suns play the Hawks up in Darwin, Hawks 7-2, and if you can be 7-2 and not be playing at your best, then your PFI and your seedings definitely have integrity. So Brisbane at 2 and Collingwood at 1.
Yeah. Oh, you've sort of checked me there.
What have
I've
done?
gone the play-in game, Gold Coast Hawthorn, so neither is in, but the winner goes in.
Oh, there you go.
And I've got Adelaide in a play-in game as well. They go in if they beat Collingwood.
Okay.
So I've held the 2 losers at 4 and 3. I've shuffled them around, but Geelong are at 4. They play in such good games, and the Bulldogs at 3. That was as good as a win for mine.
I love what they're doing.
As good as a win. Brisbane at 2 and Collingwood reassume their place at 1. That was just vintage Road Warrior Magpie behaviour. Undermanned, don't care, go across the country. This is what we do. Walk in, face an opponent that's all fizzed up and take them down.
Yeah.
Just so good.
It was a good win, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they'll keep coming as well. Like how they manage their personnel. They love playing on the G, so they get another good test against Adelaide. They'll be welcoming that. And Adelaide should absolutely be welcoming the test of their style and how it stands up. I think you love playing the best teams at a time when you're actually going really well too, because you find out a bit about yourself.